Marcus Ellison was 39 years old when a nurse he had never met walked into his recovery room and handed him a manila envelope that would confirm everything he had refused to believe. He was still wearing a hospital gown. His left hand was connected to an IV drip. The anesthesia had not fully cleared his blood yet, and the morning light through the blinds was the pale, uncertain kind that belonged to rooms where people woke up different than they had gone under. His chest surgery had taken 4.5 hours. The cardiothoracic team at Charlotte Memorial had told him it went well. They told him his heart was strong. They did not know that the woman who had kissed him at the pre-op door and told him she would be in the waiting room all day had left the hospital at 11:04 that morning and had not come back. The nurse's name was Delphine. She was older, late 50s, and she had the kind of face that had spent a lifetime delivering difficult things with steady hands. She set the envelope on his bedside table without ceremony. "This was brought in by a courier about 2 hours ago," she said. "Your wife signed for it at the reception desk and then left it at the nurse's station." She paused. "I'm sorry." Marcus looked at the envelope for a long moment. His name was on the front, not his full name, his first name only, written in his wife's handwriting. He had been married to Simone for 9 years. He had built their house with his own contractors. He had carried her mother's casket. He had paid off her graduate school loans in a lump sum without telling her how he had managed to do it. Because he was an architect, and architects understood that the foundation of a thing never needed to be announced. It simply needed to hold. The envelope contained divorce papers, filed 2 days before his surgery, signed by a lawyer Marcus had never heard of, with a clause he would need to read 3 times before the shape of it became clear. She had no idea what Marcus had spent the last 11 years quietly building while she was building her exit. What happened next would cost Simone far more than she ever thought she stood to gain. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning he came home from the hospital, 8 days after the surgery, 4 days after Delphine's envelope, Marcus moved through the house slowly. Not because his chest hurt, though it did. Because he was looking at things the way a structural engineer looks at a building he suspects has been compromised. He was noting load points. He was reading stress fractures. The kitchen was the same kitchen he had designed and overseen to the tile. He had laid the backsplash himself on a weekend in October 2 years ago. A herringbone pattern in matte ivory, because Simone had seen something similar in a magazine and said it was the kind of detail that made a house feel intentional. He had done it on a ladder with his shirt off while she sat at the island and drank wine and made him laugh. He had thought, laying those tiles in the specific silence of a man who loves his work, that this was what building a life was. You made the walls. You made the bones. You did it carefully. His grandfather had told him once, in the driveway of a house in West Charlotte that had been in the family for 40 years, an architect's first obligation is to the structure, not the surface. Surface is decoration. Structure is truth. His grandfather, Cecil Ellison, had been a carpenter who never finished high school, and who had built furniture with a precision that made cabinet makers half his age look at his joinery and go quiet. He had been dead for 6 years. Marcus thought about him almost every day. The coffee was cold beside him. He had made it and forgotten it in the way a man forgets small comforts when larger things are occupying him. He had met Simone at a fundraiser for a community development firm downtown. She was wearing a deep green dress. She was a hospital administrator, composed and decisive, with a laugh that she released in unexpected moments. He had spent 3 months convincing her that he was worth the trouble of knowing. She had told him later that she knew at the second dinner that she was going to marry him, She had said it simply, without performance. He had believed her. For a long time, that belief had been one of the foundational things. He was sitting now at the kitchen island with the divorce papers unfolded in front of him, though he no longer needed to read them. He had read them until the words existed in him like a blueprint he could not stop reviewing. The specific clause that had made him read 3 times was a provision asserting that their joint assets constituted the majority of Simone's individual contribution to the marriage, citing a document her lawyer called a personal investment ledger, a document Marcus had never seen, in handwriting that was almost but not quite Simone's. The clause was designed to give her claim to specific accounts tied to work he had done before they met. His phone sat face down on the counter. His other phone, a device that had existed in his inner jacket pocket for 7 years, registered to a holding company, unknown to Simone, sat in the inner pocket of his coat, hanging by the door. He had not touched it yet. He was doing what his grandfather had taught him to do first: assess the structure before you touch a single thing. He had been looking at the crack in the foundation for 6 months without naming it. The evening Simone came home without her work bag, which she usually carried everywhere. A charge on a credit card statement for a hotel 40 minutes from their house. A Tuesday afternoon. A name that appeared twice in her call log during a week she said she had been at a conference in Raleigh. Marcus had noted these things. He had not confronted them. He had learned from his grandfather, and from 15 years of architectural practice, that when you moved before you had the full picture, you risked the integrity of everything you were trying to preserve. The divorce papers, filed 2 days before they opened his chest, told him he no longer needed to preserve anything. He heard his phone buzz on the counter. A text from his college friend Terrence. "You home? Coming by around 2 if you're up for it." Marcus turned the phone over and typed back, "Come." Then, he went to the coat by the door and removed the other phone, and unlocked it and began to make calls. The notification came not from the other phone, but from the doorbell camera he had installed 18 months ago after a rash of package thefts on their block. It was a small dome camera with a wide-angle lens and a 90-day cloud archive, and it had been recording the front approach of the house continuously since October of the previous year. He had not reviewed the footage in months. He sat at his home office desk, still in the drafting chair he'd had since graduate school, the same chair, reupholstered twice, and opened the archive on his laptop. He was not looking for any one thing. He was building a timeline. He started it 6 months back and moved forward in time-lapse, watching the routine choreography of a house, mail carrier, neighbors walking dogs, delivery trucks. Simone leaving in the morning, Simone returning in the evening. He found the first deviation on a Thursday in February. A silver Mercedes SUV, not a model any of their friends or family drove, pulled up at 2:18 in the afternoon and idled for 11 minutes before pulling away. No plates visible at that angle. He found it again 2 weeks later. And again. And again. He switched to the driveway camera on the side of the house, a second unit he had installed to monitor contractor deliveries when they were renovating the guest bath. Different angle. On the third Thursday occurrence, the angle was just wide enough. He could see a man get out of the Mercedes and walk toward the side entrance. Marcus did not react visibly. His hands did not move. He exhaled once through his nose, the way a man exhales when a measurement confirms what he already knew. He opened a new folder on his desktop. He named it simply Structure. Then he began to document. He downloaded 6 months of doorbell footage. He cross-referenced dates against the credit card statement, the call log anomalies, a receipt he had found in February in the pocket of a coat Simone had worn to what she said was a work dinner. 11 visits in 6 months, all on days when Marcus was either at work or traveling for a project. The first visit had occurred 4 days after Simone mentioned, casually at dinner, that her old colleague Dominic Ward had moved back to Charlotte from D.C. The name had not meant anything to Marcus at the time. He typed the name into a search window. Dominic Ward. Hospital administrator turned private equity consultant, currently affiliated with a healthcare real estate development firm called Meridian Capital Group. Based in uptown Charlotte. Former colleague of Simone's from her years at a hospital network in Raleigh. LinkedIn profile listed under his photo. A man in his late 40s, expensive suit, the kind of smile that had been practiced in boardrooms. Marcus pulled up the name of the attorney who had filed Simone's divorce papers. He searched the attorney's name alongside Meridian Capital Group. They had worked together on a healthcare facility acquisition 18 months ago. He leaned back in the drafting chair. Then he picked up the inner pocket phone and called the one person he knew would understand exactly what he needed. Patricia Oakes had been practicing family and asset law in Charlotte for 27 years, and she had the quality that Marcus most respected in a professional. She listened completely before she spoke. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown, spare and precise, with a long conference table and a single piece of abstract art on the wall that Marcus had always thought looked like two structures in the process of being pulled apart. He laid the folder on the table. Printed footage stills, bank records, the divorce filing, a printed timeline he had built the night before, organized by date and cross-referenced by evidence type. The kind of document he would have brought to a structural review meeting. Patricia put on her reading glasses and went through it without speaking for 11 minutes. "The personal investment ledger," she said finally. "It's a forgery," Marcus said. "The handwriting is close, but the pressure pattern is wrong. And the accounts it references are held by a holding company that wasn't disclosed to Simone during the marriage." Patricia looked at him over the glasses. Because she didn't know about them. She didn't know about them. Patricia set down the papers. "Marcus, how much are we talking about in those accounts?" "The holding company has 3 active real estate trusts and a development equity portfolio. The total current valuation is approximately $4.1 million. Patricia was quiet for a moment in the particular way of someone recalibrating. Then she removed her glasses and folded them on the table. "She filed 2 days before your surgery. The date is on the filing. She knew about the surgery. She dropped me at pre-op." Patricia said nothing for a moment. "Then, the attorney she used has a prior relationship with Dominic Ward's firm. That is going to matter." She made a note. "The forged ledger is fraudulent misrepresentation of marital assets in a legal proceeding. That is a separate issue from the divorce itself." She looked at him steadily. "You understand what I'm telling you." "She made a strategic error," Marcus said. "She tried to do this legally, and she didn't know what she was doing legally." "She made several strategic errors," Patricia said. "Give me 72 hours. He drove home in the late afternoon, the city going orange around him. Real power operated in quiet rooms. He had believed that since the first time he had watched his grandfather settle a contractor dispute without raising his voice, with nothing more than a ledger and patience, and the absolute certainty of a man who kept clean records. 2 days after the meeting with Patricia, Marcus drove 40 minutes south to Concord, to the house where his Aunt Renata had lived for 31 years. She was 74, a retired school principal, and she knew Simone the way people who have watched someone for a long time learn to know them, not from the highlights, but from the consistent, small behaviors. She made coffee, and they sat on her back porch in the November cold, wrapped in coats. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think before you answer," Marcus said. She looked at him. Ask, did you ever meet Dominic Ward? Renata held the mug in both hands and looked at the yard for a long moment. A bird feeder she had maintained for a decade swayed on its hook in the light wind. She brought him to Easter, she said finally, 3 years ago. She introduced him as a work colleague. He brought wine. I didn't like the way he listened, like he was waiting for information. Marcus nodded. 3 years ago was before the Mercedes visits, before the hotel charge, before all of it. Renata turned to look at him. Your grandfather built that first house on Davis Street with nothing but a transit level and his own 2 hands, and when the neighbor tried to claim the property line had moved, Cecil walked out with a hand-drawn survey he had made the week he poured the foundation. She paused. He kept every record of everything he ever built because he knew the day might come when someone would try to tell him the building was never his. Marcus looked at the bird feeder. You kept records, Renata said. I kept records. She nodded once. Then you already know what you're going to do. That same evening, Marcus returned home and made dinner. He set 2 plates. Simone came home at 7 and kissed his cheek without quite meeting his eyes, and he told her the surgery site was healing well and asked about her day, and she told him about a budget review and a staffing issue. And they ate the pasta he had made, and she asked if he needed anything, and he said no, and they moved through the apartment the way 2 strangers maintain the choreography of familiarity. He was watching. He did not sleep. He spent the night building the second document, the counter-evidence file Patricia had requested. Dominic Ward's financial profile showed 2 prior civil suits, both settled without admission, both involving allegations of fraudulent asset claims and business partnership dissolutions. The attorney Simone had retained had been sanctioned by the state bar 4 years ago for misrepresentation in a divorce proceeding. Sanctions that were public record but that required knowing to look for. The personal investment ledger had been created using a document design software that embedded metadata. The file creation date was 19 days ago. Marcus's marriage was 9 years old. Patricia had called it 3 strategic errors. Marcus counted 6. The meeting happened in Patricia's conference room on a Friday morning, 12 days after Marcus had laid the first folder on her table. Simone arrived with her attorney, a compact man in a gray suit who set his briefcase down with the confidence of someone who did not yet know what room he was in. Dominic Ward was not present. He would not be. Simone sat across the table from Marcus for the first time since the hospital. She looked composed. She looked the way she had always looked when she was performing competence in a room where she was not certain she had the advantage. Marcus's hands were folded on the table in front of him. He waited until everyone was seated. Patricia placed the first document on the table and slid it toward Simone's attorney. This is a forensic metadata report on the personal investment ledgers submitted as evidence in your client's filing, she said. The document was created 19 days ago. The marriage it is meant to evidence is 9 years old. She placed the second document beside it. This is the State Bar record of your prior sanction for evidentiary misrepresentation. A pause. This is your client's financial institution records for the past 36 months. Obtained through proper discovery channels, cross-referenced against the accounts she claimed were joint contributions. A third document. And this is a recording made lawfully under North Carolina's one-party consent statute of a phone conversation between your client and Dominic Ward occurring 11 days before the divorce filing, in which the structure of the fraudulent ledger is discussed explicitly. The attorney's pen had stopped moving. Marcus watched Simone's face move through the stages in precise sequence. Certainty, confusion, the beginning of calculation, the end of calculation, and then something quieter and more final, the expression of someone who has understood too late, the full dimensions of the room they walked into. "The accounts," Simone said. Her voice was careful. "Were held by Ellison Architecture Holdings, LLC," Marcus said. "A company I incorporated 11 years ago. Before we met, the operating documents, the founding charter, the tax records from year 1, and the independent audits are all in the 4th exhibit behind you." He did not move. "You were trying to claim assets that were never marital property using a document your attorney created 19 days ago. That is fraud." "Patricia is filing the criminal referral this afternoon." "Marcus." She said his name the way a person says a name when all other words have failed. "I'm not angry, Simone," he said. "I want you to understand that. Anger requires ongoing investment in people who have made their choices clear." He paused. "I'm clear." Simone's attorney began to speak. Renata's voice came from the far end of the table. Marcus had asked her to come, and she had come. And it was the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years managing rooms full of people who wanted to argue. "You're done, young man." The attorney stopped. Marcus stood. He gathered his copy of the exhibits, straightened the edges against the table, and placed them in his leather portfolio. He did not look at Simone again. He nodded once to Patricia, and once to Renata, and he walked to the door and opened it, and stepped through it, and let it close behind him, with a sound that was almost nothing at all. 14 months had passed like water through a good foundation. Marcus was on the deck of a house he had finished building in March, his own house now, 4 miles from the old one, a corner lot in a neighborhood near the university where old oaks threw good shade in the afternoon. He had designed it himself on paper before he ever brought in a contractor. He had laid the deck boards by hand over 2 weekends in February, working in the specific silence of a man who was building something that was entirely his. The Japanese maple he had planted in the side yard had taken. It was the color of dried embers in the fall light. He had chosen it because his grandfather had kept one in a ceramic pot on his porch for 30 years, and because Marcus believed, in the way that a man comes to believe things that are earned rather than inherited, that some things needed tending and nothing more. Jade came out through the sliding door with 2 cups of coffee and set one beside him without ceremony. She was a structural engineer he had known for 4 years through professional circles, a woman who had a habit of asking the second question, the one that followed the obvious one, and who had never in 9 months of this thing between them performed for an audience that wasn't there. She sat beside him and looked at the maple and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. His firm had closed on a mixed-use development contract in the first quarter, a 7-building project in the South End, worth more than anything Ellison Architecture Holdings had taken on before. The criminal referral had resulted in a formal investigation. Simone's attorney had voluntarily surrendered his license pending review. Dominic Ward had quietly relocated to Richmond. Simone was living in a rental apartment in Mooresville, working in hospital administration at a smaller regional network, managing a department she used to oversee managers of. Marcus had heard this through a mutual acquaintance. He had registered it the way you register weather. Then he had gone back to the blueprints on his desk. Renata had called on Wednesday. She was coming for Thanksgiving. She was bringing the sweet potato pie she had made every year since Marcus was 9 years old, the one she made from her own mother's recipe, with the crust pressed by hand into the pan. He picked up the coffee. The morning was cool and clear, and the maple held the light the way good materials hold light, with a quality that wasn't borrowed. Some things, he thought, were worth the patience to build right. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.